I never thought the happiest day of my life would be preceded by a targeted campaign to destroy my reputation. But there I was, just 1 week before my wedding, staring at a screen while a group of people I once called family mocked my body and my sanity behind my back. How do you go from planning a double wedding future with your best friends to being the villain in a story you didn't even know was being written? It started with a few missed dinner invites and a couple of awkward silences, but it ended with a betrayal so deep, it threatened to ruin my marriage before I even walked down the aisle. And the worst part? The people pulling the strings were still smiling to my face, pretending everything was fine while they slowly erased me from my own social circle. Looking back, the signs were there, flickering like a dying light bulb before the room finally went dark. My husband Leo and I had been part of this tight-knit group for years. We were the kind of friends who shared everything. Late-night vent sessions over cheap takeout, dreams of the future, and eventually, the excitement of our upcoming weddings. There was another couple in the group. Let's call them Sarah and Mark. Sarah and I were supposed to be going through this beautiful milestone together. We were both brides-to-be, navigating the chaos of guest lists and floral arrangements. But somewhere along the line, the shared joy turned into a toxic competition that I didn't even realize I was competing in. It all really came to a head during a one-on-one talk I had with Sarah. We had met up to clear the air because I could feel this weird, heavy tension whenever we were in the same room. I thought we were just stressed. I thought we were just wedding-brained. But during that conversation, things got heated. It wasn't a scream fest, but it was one of those cold, sharp exchanges where you realize the person sitting across from you doesn't actually like you anymore. We walked away from that table with a shaky truce, but the air between us felt like glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Leo and I tried. We really did. We spent weeks initiating sit-down talks, trying to bridge the gap, trying to be the bigger people for the sake of the group. We didn't want our friends to have to choose. We didn't want to be the drama couple. But as the months went by, the invitations stopped coming. We'd see photos on Instagram of the whole group out at dinner, the same group I had introduced Sarah and Mark to, and we weren't there. At first, we told ourselves we were just busy. We were drowning in wedding errands, flying back and forth to our home country to get everything ready. We excused their behavior because it was easier than admitting we were being phased out of our own life. But then, the rumors started. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the conversation just stops? Or when a mutual friend looks at you with a mix of pity and judgment? I started hearing whispers through the grapevine. People we had gone to school with, people I hadn't spoken to in months, were suddenly talking about me. The story circulating was that I was frantic and unstable. They were telling everyone that I was obsessed with them, that I was furious because they were copying our wedding. It was a complete fabrication, a twisted version of a private frustration I'd felt months ago, now weaponized to make me look like a bridezilla losing her mind. I heard it first from a close friend who had heard it from a friend of Mark's. When I confronted Mark, he looked me right in the eye and denied everything. He played the victim, acting shocked that I would even suggest he'd say such things. But the universe has a funny way of showing you the truth when you're finally ready to see it. The breaking point happened just a few days later. I was walking through our neighborhood, just trying to clear my head, when I accidentally ran into one of Mark's close friends. We exchanged a few awkward pleasantries, and I went on my way, thinking nothing of it. But less than an hour later, a friend sent me a screenshot of that person's Instagram story. It was a direct, albeit indirect, shot at me. They posted that I had no right to speak or have an opinion because I was overweight. They used my physical appearance to invalidate my feelings, my character, and my place in the group. In that moment, the wedding dress in my closet felt like a lead weight. I was supposed to be celebrating love and new beginnings, but instead, I was being bullied by adults who were acting like they never left middle school. I realized then that there is no reconciling with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. There is no peace to be found with people who use your insecurities as a punchline. So, a week before I said I do, I did the only thing I had left to do. I cut them off. I blocked the numbers, I deleted the apps, and I tried to focus on the man who actually loved me. But cutting them off was the easy part. The hard part was what came next. The realization that our common friends, people I had known since high school, were now stuck in the middle of a war they didn't ask for. The silence that followed blocking them was deafening. You'd think that cutting out toxic people would feel like a weight lifting immediately, but in that final week before the wedding, it felt like I just amputated a limb to save the rest of my body. The wound was raw, and every time I looked at my phone, I expected a notification, an apology, a frantic explanation, maybe even a further insult. But there was nothing. Just the quiet, steady hum of my own anxiety as I finalized my seating charts and packed my bags for our home country. I remember sitting on the floor of my living room, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and rolls of white ribbon, and just breaking down. The comment about my weight, the one Mark's friend had posted, kept looping in my mind like a broken record. It's one thing to have someone dislike your personality. It's another thing entirely for them to target the things you're already self-conscious about, especially when you're about to be photographed from every angle in a white dress. Every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a bride anymore. I saw the version of myself they were mocking in their group chats. I felt small, even as I was being told I was too much. Leo found me like that, sitting in the middle of the mess, and he didn't even have to ask what was wrong. He just sat down on the floor next to me and held me. He was the one who had to deal with the fallout on his side, too. Mark had been his friend, and seeing that friendship dissolve into rumors and vitriol was hurting him in a different way. But Leo was my rock. He kept reminding me that the people who really loved us were already on the guest list, and the people who didn't belong had effectively removed themselves. We flew back home for the ceremony, and honestly, being thousands of miles away from the toxicity felt like a sanctuary. But the drama didn't stay behind in our apartment abroad. Even as we were getting ready for the rehearsal dinner, the last-minute cancellations came in. Sarah and Mark, who had RSVP'd yes months ago, suddenly had a family travel emergency. They didn't tell us directly. They just updated the portal or sent a vague message through someone else. It was a final petty power move. They wanted us to know that they were choosing anything else over our happiness. The wedding itself was beautiful. I want to tell you that I forgot all about them the moment the music started, and for the most part, I did. Seeing Leo standing there, looking at me like I was the only person in the world, made the rumors feel like distant static. We danced, we cried, we celebrated with our families. But even in the high points, there was a ghost at the feast. I'd look at the table where our high school friends, Chloe and Mike, were sitting, and I'd see them checking their phones. I knew who they were talking to. I knew that even as I was celebrating my marriage, the other side was likely dissecting the photos we posted, finding new things to criticize. When we finally returned home as a married couple, reality hit us like a cold bucket of water. We were the married couple now, but we were also the couple who caused the rift. That's the thing about friend groups. People hate having to choose, and they often resent the person who makes them see the truth. Chloe and Mike had been my friends since high school. I was the one who introduced them to Sarah and Mark when they moved abroad. I had literally handed them their new social circle on a silver platter, and now I was being treated like a guest in my own life. The dynamic shifted into something incredibly awkward and clinical. It started with what I call the schedule. Because Chloe and Mike didn't want to lose Sarah and Mark, but they also didn't want to lose us, they started treating us like divorced parents. They would have a Sarah and Mark night on Friday, and then they would fit us in on Sunday. I can't even describe how demeaning that feels. You're sitting there with people you've known for over a decade, people who have seen you through your worst breakups and your biggest achievements, and you can feel them checking the clock. You know that if you stay too long, you're cutting into the other time. You know that anything you say might be relayed back to the people who mocked your weight and called you frantic. The intimacy was gone. Every conversation felt like an interview where I had to watch my words, making sure I didn't give them any ammunition to take back to the other camp. I started noticing that we were being left out of the big things. A group trip would be planned, but the core group, which now included Sarah and Mark but excluded us, would discuss it in a separate chat. We'd only hear about it after the flights were booked. When we'd ask why we weren't invited, the excuse was always the same. "Oh, we thought you were too busy with the wedding." Or, "We didn't want to make it awkward since you guys aren't talking to them." It was a slow motion shunning. They weren't saying, "We don't want to be your friends," but they were showing us that our presence was an inconvenience. We were the difficult ones because we were the ones who had been hurt and chose to set a boundary. In the eyes of the group, Sarah and Mark were the fun ones who stayed, and we were the ones who brought the drama by holding people accountable for their actions. One night, Leo and I were sitting on the couch, looking at a photo Chloe had just posted. It was the four of them at a bar we used to go to every Friday. They were all laughing, arms around each other, looking like the perfect, happy family. "They look like they're doing just fine without us," Leo said softly. His voice didn't have anger in it, just a deep, profound sadness. "We're being replaced," I whispered, "by the people I introduced them to." That's the part that stung the most. I had built this bridge, and now I was being pushed off it while everyone else crossed over. I started questioning everything. Was I actually the problem? Was I being too sensitive? Maybe the rumors were right. Maybe I was being frantic. I spent hours scrolling through my old messages with Sarah, trying to find the moment where it all went wrong, trying to find the smoking gun that proved I was the villain they said I was. But all I found were messages of me being supportive, me checking in on her wedding planning, me trying to be a friend. The villain narrative wasn't based on what I had done. It was based on what they needed me to be, so they didn't have to feel guilty about how they treated me. The weight of it started to affect my marriage. Leo and I were supposed to be in the honeymoon phase, but instead, we were spending our evenings dissecting the latest passive-aggressive Instagram post, or debating whether or not we should even show up to the next scheduled hangout with Chloe and Mike. It felt like we were living in a house with a ghost. You can try to ignore it, you can try to go about your day, but you always feel that chill in the air. I finally decided I couldn't do the scheduled hangouts anymore. It felt like we were a chore on a to-do list. I reached out to Chloe, hoping that our 15 years of history would count for something. I wanted to have a real, honest conversation about how it felt to be sidelined. I wanted to know if she actually valued our friendship, or if we were just a relic of her past that she wasn't ready to throw away yet. But when I called her, she sounded tired. Not tired like she'd had a long day at work, but tired of me. Tired of the situation. "I just don't want to be in the middle, okay?" she said, her voice tight. "You guys have your issues with them, and that's fine, but why does it have to affect us? We just want everyone to be happy." "But I'm not happy, Chloe," I told her, my voice trembling. "They insulted my body. They spread lies about my mental state. How can you sit at dinner with them on Friday and then look me in the face on Sunday like everything is normal? Doesn't loyalty mean anything?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and in that silence, I got my answer. The silence on the other end of the line wasn't just a pause. It was an answer. It was the sound of 15 years of friendship evaporating into thin air because it was simply too inconvenient to stand up for what was right. In that moment, I realized that Chloe wasn't stuck in the middle. She had already chosen a side, the side of least resistance. She chose the side that didn't make her feel guilty for wanting to have a good time. She chose the side that didn't require her to have an uncomfortable conversation with people who were clearly in the wrong. "I have to go," she finally said, her voice sounding small and distant. Let's just try to make Sunday work, okay? I really miss you guys." I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. I didn't miss her. I missed the person I thought she was. I missed the girl who used to sit on my bed in high school and promise that we'd be bridesmaids at each other's weddings. I missed the friend who I thought would have my back when the world started throwing stones. But that person didn't exist anymore. In her place was someone who was willing to watch me get dragged through the mud as long as she didn't get any on her shoes. The following Sunday, Leo and I did something we hadn't done in months. We canceled. We didn't give a long explanation. We didn't send a paragraph of text explaining our feelings. We just said we weren't up for it. And you know what the most painful part was? They didn't even push back. There was no, "Are you okay?" or "Is something wrong?" Just the thumbs up emoji and a, "No worries, catch you next time." It was like we were already ghosts in our own lives. As the weeks turned into months, the scheduled meetings became fewer and farther between until they stopped altogether. But the toxicity from Sarah and Mark didn't stop just because we weren't in the room. If anything, our absence gave them more room to build their narrative. They were the victims of our sudden coldness. They were the ones trying to keep the group together while we were being difficult. I started getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old classmates from our home country, batchmates as we called them. They were asking if I was okay, but in that way that felt like they were fishing for gossip. "I heard things are really tense between you and Sarah," one girl messaged me. "Is it true you tried to sabotage her wedding dress?" I felt like I was losing my mind. Sabotage her dress? I hadn't even seen her in 6 months. But that was the level of absurdity the rumors had reached. It wasn't enough for them to just push us out. They had to make sure no one else would want us either. They were poisoning the well of our entire social history. Every memory I had from high school, every shared experience with that group, was being rewritten with me as the villain. The weight of it started to seep into my physical health. I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach, dreading opening social media, because I didn't know what new lie would be waiting for me. And the comment about my weight, the one that started it all, it lived in my head like a parasite. I found myself skipping meals or staring at my reflection with a kind of hatred I'd never felt before. I was a bride. I was supposed to be glowing. I was supposed to be feeling like the most beautiful version of myself. Instead, I felt like a monster. Leo saw it. He saw me shrinking, not just physically, but spiritually. One night, he took my phone out of my hand and put it on the high shelf where I couldn't reach it. "Stop looking at them," he said, his voice firm but filled with love. "They are not the authors of your story, babe. They're just background characters who stayed in the play too long." "But they're winning, Leo," I cried, the tears finally breaking through. "They have our friends. They have our reputation. They're out there laughing and having fun while we're sitting here in the dark, counting the people who don't love us anymore." Leo sat down next to me and pulled me into his lap. "They haven't won anything," he whispered into my hair. "They have a group of people who are too scared to tell them the truth. They have friendships built on gossip and exclusion. We have a marriage. We have a future. We have each other. If that's losing, then I never want to win." His words were a lifeline, but the reality of our daily life abroad was still incredibly isolating. Moving to a new country is hard enough, but moving there and realizing the only support system you had was built on sand is a different kind of trauma. We were thousands of miles away from our families, living in a city that felt colder and more indifferent every day. We tried to focus on our own wedding planning, the big day back home. We threw ourselves into the details. We chose the music, the food, the flowers. We tried to make it a celebration of us, not a response to them. But every time a guest list question came up, it was a minefield. Do we invite the people who are still friends with them? Do we tell people why Sarah and Mark aren't there? We decided on a no explanation policy. If people asked, we just said we'd grown apart. We tried to be the bigger people, hoping that our silence would speak louder than their noise. We thought that by not engaging in the drama would eventually starve for lack of attention. We were wrong. A week before we were set to fly out for our wedding, I ran into Mark's friend again, the one who had posted the comment about my weight. It was at a local grocery store of all places. I tried to just keep my head down and walk past, but he went out of his way to block my path. "Hey," he said, a smug, oily smile on his face. "Excited for the big day?" I heard you're having a hard time fitting into the dress. Must be all that stress eating Sarah says you've been doing. My heart stopped. The world narrowed down to the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. It wasn't just a social media post anymore. It was a direct, face-to-face assault. Sarah was telling people I was stress eating. She was mocking my struggles with the very people who were supposedly our mutual friends. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I just looked him dead in the eye, pushed my cart around him, and walked out of the store, leaving half my groceries behind. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and I realized the war wasn't over. It had just moved into a new phase. They weren't just trying to exclude us anymore, they were trying to destroy us. And the worst part was that our common friends, the ones stuck in the middle, were the ones providing them with the information they used as weapons. How did Sarah know I was stressed? How did she know I was struggling with my confidence? I had only told one person. I had told Chloe. The realization didn't hit me like a lightning bolt. It felt more like a slow, freezing chill creeping up my spine. I sat in my car, the engine idling, staring at the grocery store entrance. My mind was racing, replaying every vulnerability I'd shared with Chloe over the last few months. I had told her about my dress fittings. I had told her how the stress of the rumors was making me turn to comfort food. I had cried to her about how my self-esteem was at an all-time low. I thought I was confiding in a sister. I thought I was speaking into a vault. Instead, I had been handing her the very stones that Sarah and Mark were now throwing at me. How do you even process that kind of betrayal? When someone you've known for 15 years takes your most private insecurities and serves them up as entertainment for the people who hate you? It wasn't just that Chloe was staying neutral. She was acting as a double agent. She was the one providing the intel that allowed them to hurt me with such surgical precision. Every time she sat down for those scheduled Sunday hangouts with Leo and me, she was likely just gathering more material to bring back to the Friday night crowd. I didn't even drive home right away. I couldn't. I felt like if I walked into our apartment, I would bring this poisonous energy with me, and I didn't want it touching the life Leo and I were trying to build. I called Leo, but my voice wouldn't work. I just sobbed into the phone until he started panicking, asking if I'd been in an accident. She told them, Leo. I finally choked out. Everything I said to her in confidence? Mark's friend just used it to mock me in the middle of the store. He knew about the dress. He knew about the eating. Chloe told them. There was a long, heavy silence on Leo's end. I could hear his breathing change, that low, rhythmic sound he makes when he's trying to suppress a massive amount of anger for my sake. Come home, he said, his voice dropping an octave. We're done. No more scheduled Sundays. No more trying to bridge the gap. We're burning the bridge, and we're walking away. When I got home, Leo had already started a list. It wasn't a guest list or a to-do list. It was a list of every boundary we were about to enforce. He was done being the reasonable one. He saw what this was doing to me, and he realized what I hadn't yet. You cannot find peace in a war zone. You have to leave the territory entirely. The next day, I didn't call Chloe to argue. I didn't send a long, emotional text. I simply sent a message that said, I know you told them about the dress and my struggles with the stress. I thought 15 years meant something more than gossip fodder. Please don't contact us again. The response was almost instantaneous. My phone lit up with a novel-length text. It was a classic, I'm sorry you feel that way, non-apology. She claimed she didn't mean it like that she was just venting because she was stressed by the situation too, and that I was overreacting and pushing everyone away. It was the ultimate gaslight, making me feel like the villain for catching her in a betrayal. I didn't reply. I blocked her. I blocked Mike. I blocked every single person who was stuck in the middle. Because the truth is, if you're stuck in the middle while one side is being bullied, you've already picked the side of the bully. The week of the wedding back in our home country was a whirlwind. We were surrounded by our families, by cousins who had known us since we were in diapers, and by old friends who actually knew our hearts. It should have been perfect. And yet, the shadow followed us. Because Sarah and Mark were also from our hometown, and their batchmates were everywhere. At the wedding, I'd see groups of people whispering as I walked by. I'd see them glancing at my body, clearly checking to see if the overweight and unstable rumors were true. It's a surreal experience to be at your own wedding and feel like you're a specimen under a microscope. I felt like I had to perform happiness and perfection just to prove the rumors wrong. I couldn't just be a bride. I had to be a rebuttal. But then, the ceremony started. I remember the doors opening and seeing Leo at the end of the aisle. He looked like he was seeing a miracle. In that moment, the batchmates, the rumors, the scheduled Sundays, and the 15 years of wasted friendship with Chloe didn't exist. It was just us. I realized that the reason Sarah and Mark were so obsessed with destroying me was because they didn't have what we had. They had a circle of friends who would turn on them the moment the gossip got boring. We had a foundation. We got married. We danced until our feet bled. We laughed until we couldn't breathe. For 48 hours, I convinced myself that the drama was over. I thought that by making it to the I do, I had won the war. But then we flew back home, to the country where we worked. We walked back into our apartment, and the reality of our isolation hit us again. We were married, yes. We were happy, yes. But we were also alone in a foreign country where our entire social infrastructure had been dismantled by people we once loved. A few days after we got back, I saw a post from the group. They were all out celebrating Sarah and Mark's anniversary of being engaged, or some other made-up milestone. Chloe was there, front and center, laughing in a photo with Sarah. The caption was something about loyalty and real friends who don't cause drama. The irony was physically painful. I realized then that the schedule was officially over. Chloe and Mike didn't even try to reach out for our Sunday slot. It was like once they were caught, they didn't even feel the need to pretend anymore. They just folded back into the toxic group like they had never left. I was the one who had introduced them, the one who had welcomed them into this life abroad, and now I was the one looking through the window from the outside. Leo and I tried to make new friends, but it's hard when you're in your late 20s and work full time. Every new person we met felt like a potential threat. What if they're friends with Sarah? I'd find myself thinking. What if Mark finds them on Instagram and starts whispering in their ear? The trauma of the betrayal had turned me into a version of myself I didn't recognize. Guarded, suspicious, and deeply lonely. I'd spend my nights scrolling through our old photos. Photos of us at Christmas. Photos of us at the beach. Photos of us planning our futures. I'd look at Chloe's face and try to find the moment her loyalty curdled. Was it when Sarah started getting more popular in the group? Was it when it became easier to agree with the bullies than to stand up for the victim? I felt like I was mourning a death. But there was no funeral, no flowers, and no closure. Just a series of unfollows and a deep, aching void where a decade and a half of history used to be. One evening, about a month after the wedding, I was sitting on the balcony watching the sunset. Leo came out and sat next to me, handing me a glass of wine. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the common friends problem. The ones who are still stuck in the middle, or the ones who have already moved to the other side." "I don't want to talk about them anymore, Leo," I said, feeling that familiar knot of anxiety in my chest. "I know," he said, "but we have to decide what we're going to do, because they're still talking. I heard from Mike today." My heart skipped a beat. Mike? What did he want? Leo sighed, looking out at the city lights. He didn't apologize. He actually had the nerve to ask if we'd be cool with them coming over next weekend. But there's a catch. He said Sarah and Mark want to sit down with us one last time to clear the air before their own wedding. He said they feel bullied by our silence. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. They had mocked my body, spread lies about my sanity, and leaked my secrets. And now they were the ones feeling bullied Because I had stopped giving them the opportunity to hurt me?
What did you tell him? I asked.
Leo looked at me, his eyes hard. I told him I'd ask my wife. But I think we both know what the answer is. Bullied by our silence. I had to repeat the words out loud, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. You ever have someone punch you in the face, and then complain that your jaw hurt their knuckles? That was exactly what Sarah and Mark were doing. They had spent months systematically dismantling my reputation, mocking my physical appearance, and weaponizing my deepest insecurities, all while I said nothing. I had retreated. I had blocked them. I had chosen to simply exist in a world where they didn't. And to them, that was the ultimate sin. Because when you stop reacting to a bully, you take away their power. And they hate nothing more than being powerless. They don't want to clear the air, Leo, I said, my voice finally finding its strength. They want an audience. They want us to sit there and listen to them justify why they did what they did, so they can walk away feeling like the good guys before their own wedding. They want a clean slate that they haven't earned. Leo nodded, leaning back against the balcony railing. I told Mike that we aren't interested in a performance. I told him that if they really cared about clearing the air, they would have started with an apology for the things they said about you. Do you know what his response was? Let me guess, I sighed. He said he doesn't want to get involved in the details? Exactly, Leo said. He said, I don't know who said what. I just want my friends to get along. It's the ultimate coward's shield. He gets to feel like a peacemaker while standing on the side of the people doing the damage. That was the moment the last string of my connection to that entire group snapped. It wasn't just Sarah and Mark anymore. It was the facilitators. It was the neutral observers who watched the fire burn and then complained about the smoke. I realized that Mike and Chloe weren't stuck in the middle. They were the floor that Sarah and Mark walked on to get to us. We told them no. We didn't go to the sit-down. We didn't send a long list of grievances. We just remained silent. And as expected, the peace-loving group didn't take it well. The rumors shifted from me being unstable to us being bitter and hateful. They told everyone that we were trying to ruin their pre-wedding high. A year has passed since then. A year since I wore that white dress and tried to drown out the whispers of my own friends. A year of being married to the only person who actually stayed in my corner when the room got empty. And you'd think that after 365 days, the dust would have settled. You'd think we would have found a new rhythm, a new circle, a new life where their names never crossed our lips. But that's the thing about living abroad. When you move away from your home country, your friend group isn't just a social circle, it's your survival net. And when that net is torn, you spend a long time falling. Over the last year, Leo and I have tried to rebuild. We've gone to meetups, we've tried to connect with coworkers, we've joined hobby groups. But every time we start to get close to someone, there's that nagging fear in the back of my mind. Are they going to find out? Are they going to hear the other story? I feel like I'm walking around with a scarlet letter that I didn't even earn. And then there are Chloe and Mike. The common friends problem hasn't gone away. It's just evolved into something more polite and more painful. Because we've known them since high school, we can't just delete them from our history. They still reach out. They still send the occasional thinking of you text, or an invite to a group dinner where they guarantee Sarah and Mark won't be there. But here's the reality of the schedule that I'm struggling with now. Every time we agree to meet with Chloe and Mike, I spend the entire time wondering what they're going to report back. I see them post photos with the other couple the very next day, and I feel like a fool. It feels like we're the secondary friends, the ones they see out of obligation or pity, while the real fun happens with the people who mocked me. I recently found out that they've been planning a big getaway, a reunion for all the batchmates living here abroad. They've been talking about it for months. Everyone is going. Everyone except us. When I asked Chloe about it, she got that tired tone in her voice again. We just didn't think you'd want to go, since Sarah and Mark are organizing the Airbnb, she said. We didn't want to make it awkward for you. So instead of telling them that it's messed up to exclude us, you're just going? I asked. It's a group trip, she snapped. I can't control who organizes it. I just want to see everyone. There it was, the final, unvarnished truth. Her desire for a fun weekend was more important than 15 years of friendship. Her comfort was more important than my dignity. I looked at my wedding photos recently. I looked at the one where Chloe is standing right next to me, smiling, holding my bouquet while I adjusted my veil. I looked at her face and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of waste. All those years of secrets, all those late night phone calls, all that shared history. It was all traded in for an Airbnb invite and the chance to not be the difficult one. Leo and I are now at a crossroads. We're married, we're happy in our home, but we're living in a social desert. We see our common friends choosing the path of least resistance over and over again. We see them validating the people who tried to destroy our peace. And the question we keep asking ourselves is, what do we do now? Do we keep trying to maintain these hollowed out friendships just because we've known them since we were teenagers? Do we keep showing up for our scheduled slots, knowing that we're being discussed behind our backs the moment we leave the room? Or do we finally accept that when you leave a toxic environment, you have to leave everyone who still thinks that environment is fine? The problem is the isolation. It's the fear of being truly alone in a foreign country. But I'm starting to realize that being alone is a lot less lonely than being surrounded by people who don't actually have your back. I'm tired of being the problem for having boundaries. I'm tired of being the drama because I refuse to be bullied. And I'm tired of waiting for people to be the friends I thought they were. So I'm putting it to you. Have you ever been the one left out of your own group because you were the only one willing to call out the toxicity? Have you ever had your best friends stay neutral while someone else tried to tear you down? Because right now, I'm sitting in my living room with my husband, looking at a guest list for a life that feels emptier than it did a year ago. And I'm wondering if the price of integrity is just being alone. What would you do? Would you keep the common friends for the sake of history? Or would you burn it all down and start from zero, even if it meant having no one? I'm reading the comments, and I really want to know your thoughts. Because right now, I feel like I'm still standing at that grocery store, watching people walk around me while I'm frozen in place. If you've been through this, tell me, does it ever get easier to walk away? And if you want to hear how this all ends, or if we finally find the courage to cut the last ties, make sure you're subscribed. This has been a long year, but I think the real story is just beginning.